Hi guys, this is Beth Ramsden Crafts. This is my sewing machine which spontaneously broke a few hours later, and my cat Sushi. I don't think you've seen her before. This week I'll be showing you how to sew a Vivienne Westwood style skirt for Blythe. I have long admired Vivienne Westwood's style. Everything is gathered and draped, and I wondered if I could reproduce this style in miniature. Before we get to Blythe, let me introduce my Monster High doll, Frankie. Now you can see she's already wearing a skirt like you'll have seen in the thumbnail. I made this a few years ago, basically through lots of trial and error, using paper patterns to work out the folds and shapes that I would need. You'll be able to see it doesn't actually have a back fastening, and it's not really properly finished. This was as far as I got with the skirt at the time. But I've decided I don't want a black band like this one, and I don't want an opening in this style. I would rather have a zip fastening for the Blythe version. If you're curious, the corset is made from silk and was just freestyled at the time as well. Here is the paper template that I made at the time. The back looks like the kind of silhouette you would expect from a skirt, whereas the front kind of looks like a banana. You get an idea of the folding that will go on. Well, here is my model for today. Let's get started and make her a new skirt. Here are my new pattern pieces, slightly increased in size to fit Blythe. You can see the back piece I've altered to include a zip by folding the original in half and adding 1 centimetre seam allowance for folding around the zip. Here I'll be using one of these miniature scale doll zips. To be honest, they're not much smaller than a normal zip that's been cut to size, so do use that if that's all you have. These 2 lines mark the approximate location of the folds that we'll be creating using the front piece of the skirt. And this is the fabric I'm going to use. The same I used for the Monster High skirt. It used to be a skirt of mine, and it's just been cut up to use because I like the check pattern. I think it'll work well for the Westwood style. So let's cut out the pieces. Here I've cut 2, one reversed of the back section and one of the front. I've made a light marking on the inside, matching the template, giving myself a ½ centimetre seam allowance round the sides, with 1 centimetre top and bottom for turning over. And you can see I've done the same here on the back pieces. Now that we have it in fabric, I can give you a better idea of how the fold will sit. So the first job is to align and then sew this seam. I match up the pattern pieces with the right side of the fabric facing inside, and I pop a pin at the top where the waistband is, aligning these lines I've drawn because that's where I'll be sewing. I jump to the bottom hem of the skirt and add a pin or 2 there. And then I'll be trying to work out the excess fabric, trying to evenly disperse the folds so they're about the same size and so that they end up in the places marked on the pattern. So once I think I have the same amount of fabric left and right, I will place a pin in the middle to hold it in place. Hopefully that's clear here. Then, the direction of the fold is important because it will be reversed as you view it from the inside when it's turned right sides out. So you can see the fold goes down the way from the outside, and it's approximately lined up with that top line where the top fold is. I do hope that's clear. And the same for the bottom, using the pattern just to approximately line up that fold and this one tucks up the way from the outside. And then I will pin that into place. I'll just steal this pin, and we can have a quick look. As you can see, the fold we expect to see when it's turned the right way around. Now I'll sew all the way from top to bottom. Luckily, I have my backup old Singer machine, which I'm able to use for sewing today. Now, our first seam is done and it's looking nice. The next thing to do is to sew the back center seam. Taking your 2 pattern pieces with right sides together again, I'm aligning the straight edges and making sure, because I'm using checked fabric, that the pattern lines up. And I put a pin at the top and the middle and the bottom just to hold it in place while I sew. Now I have a 1 centimeter seam allowance for the back here, but with the machine I'm actually only going to sew from this mark to the bottom hem. The rest will actually be hand stitched. So from approximately here right down to the bottom, and this is where we'll be inserting the zip. Now that very small seam is sewn, I will actually hand stitch the rest. I'm just using a running stitch because I'll be removing it after it's been pressed. I'm just working from one side to the other, and I'll be finishing with a French knot at the top. I've started doing this when I'm making a baste stitch because it doesn't sort of knot through the fabric. It actually makes it a lot easier to pull out your stitching when you're done with it. And there we go. Now removing the pins, we can see a nice straight seam, and this inside flap we're actually going to open out and then press well with the iron. There we go, nice and flat. Now while I had the iron in hand, I actually went ahead and sort of pressed open the side seam that we'd done earlier as well, but I was careful not to flatten our nice bump at the front. We want to keep that bouncy. Just comparing it to my pattern here, you can see that our mark lines up fine with the pattern. And now we're able to remove this baste stitching, this temporary running stitch. So just snip one end, and if you knotted your thread at the start, both ends should be easy to just pull out. Okay, now we have a pressed and open center seam. So this is where we're going to put our little zip. It'll sit something like this. And again, we have to be careful about where we place the top because we're going to want to fold over this fabric to create a neat waistband, and we don't want to be folding zip into that fabric section because it would be far too bulky. So we check the seam allowance and pop some pins in. I'm lining it up so that the fold of the fabric viewed from the outside slightly obscures the zip. And when we open it out, we'll be sewing close to the teeth of the zip. Here, perhaps you can see that clearer. It's sewn in, but as we fold it over, you cannot see the seam that we just sewed. Now we line up the other half of the zip. Make sure these are evenly spaced from the top again, otherwise we'll end up with a wonky zip. And again, just place a few pins and make sure the teeth of the zip sit slightly back from the folds that we pressed. There we have the other side sewn in, and it zips up nicely. The pattern is well lined up, and next we're going to deal with the waistband. So I'm folding over and pinning my 1 centimeter seam allowance. The side seam that we first sewed, I'm making sure the hem is pressed open so that it'll lie nice and flat. And I'm just double checking that I've got the same amount of fold over from front to back. So the waistband will be nice and even when the whole skirt is sewn together. And next we'll look at the lower hem. Again, making sure these seams are pressed open so everything will lie flat. Again, it's about 1 centimeter seam allowance on this pattern. And I'm just going to place in some pins, keep it nice and level as I'm sewing. And checking each side, make sure I haven't drifted off as I'm pinning. No, looks great. So now to the machine to sew these hems. Be sure not to sew over the zip, that'll be a separate hem. And there we go, 3 more seams, and I actually changed the thread to a dark grey so it didn't stand out too much from the front. I wish I had a grey or a better colour zip as well, but this is all I had left at the moment. Now we'll be lining up these 2 seams to finish off. It's a funny shape here, but it will line up with the back piece to look normal. So I start with the hems and just make sure that they are all lined up. Start from the top and the bottom and meet in the middle. Make sure everything is properly dispersed. And there we go. Our final seam, just from top to bottom, and then we'll have our finished skirt. And there we have it, our final seam. And we're nearly finished. I'll just turn it inside out and check everything looks fine. Looking good. And the zip goes up nicely. And actually, the last thing I'll do is to press these side seams with the iron. Here we go. It should lay nice and flat now. So everything's pressed open. You could trim these if it's a bit bulky, but I'll turn it back round the right way. There we go. That's sitting much nicer now. Oh yes, looking very chic, very fashionable. Not bad at all. Let's see how it looks on our models. Here she is. Oh, it fits very nicely. I love where it lands on the waistline, and the length is just ideal, just at the knee. It does bother me slightly that we can see the zip, but if it was a better colour match, I think that would be fine. The seams look really good at the sides. Oh, I just really like it. I think it's very, very cute and very Vivienne Westwood. You can see it fits perfectly with or without some clothes tucked into the waistband. Do you like the style? Would you do this yourself? If you're interested in the pattern, I'm working on cleaning it up as a PDF that I will add to my website shop as a digital download. So do keep an eye out there for when it arrives. Thanks everyone for watching, and take care. Feel free to leave a nice comment and consider subscribing if you haven't already. I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.